Hello Poetry Pals, welcome back to another video. This week I am starting a new series about how to get published. These series of videos are going to be mostly focused on all of the things that I learned in my masters. I did a creative writing masters at Bath Spa, specialising in poetry, and a huge bit of what we learned was how to get our poems into a collection and then how to publish that collection. So save yourself £7 on university fees and subscribe to my YouTube channel and get yourself some knowledge about how to get your poems published. So this series I'm going to focus on all the different routes into publishing that you can possibly have. So you can self-publish. There's the traditional route into publishing, which I would say is definitely more like page poetry. And then there's this weird space for like spoken word artists who like build a following, and there are now publishers out there that concern themselves solely with spoken word poets and performance poets, and they work in a slightly different way as well. So I'm going to be making a few videos about all the different ways that you can publish your poetry, but for now I'm going to be focusing on the traditional route into publishing. So the traditional route into publishing, as I said, is very focused on page poetry. When I say traditional, I mean the establishment, and the establishment is currently page poetry. By the way, I'm really sorry about the sound. I needed to be in a space where I could easily film with a big space beside me to put stuff, and that's my kitchen, and it's a bit echoey. Hopefully it's not too bad. Let's get into it. So let me run through the process of getting published traditionally in one of the more traditional publishing houses for poetry and stuff like that. So you start by writing your poems. You need to have poems, and they need to be finished and good and happy, and your thing. Is a poem ever finished? Whatever, that's a debate for another time. So you've got your poems. And you're in the process of working on a collection, I imagine. What you need to do before you submit your entire manuscript to the publisher, you need to focus on getting individual poems published in literary journals. And this is where your submission spreadsheet comes in. So you want to submit, you want to get a good number of your poems, individual poems, published in journals, and then from there, once you've built up an acknowledgements page, so an acknowledgements page normally comes at the front or the back of a collection and says where the poems have been published before. And once you've built yourself an impressive acknowledgements page, then you can start submitting to publishers. Hey, future editing JC. Just wanted to nip in here and say that, of course, you can start sending your manuscript to publishers without submitting to journals, but for the more traditional, big establishment publishers, they are less likely to accept your manuscript if you haven't already built up an acknowledgements page. Just wanted to clarify that you don't have to use this route. This is just the tradition and the normal way of doing things. Am I saying that this is the right way of doing things? Absolutely not. But this is just one way to skin a cat, if you know what I'm saying. Literary journals and poetry journals they don't have a massive readership, but the people who do read them are a lot of editors, poetry editors at publishing houses. So just to clarify, you write your poems, you get them submitted to journals and accepted in journals, and then you send out your full manuscript. Now, the process of submitting to journals is long, it is tiring, and it is difficult to keep track of. There are a lot of literary journals and poetry magazines and stuff like that out there, and they take a long time to get back to you. So long. And a lot of them don't allow for simultaneous submissions, which means you can't submit the same poem to 2 different magazines because the magazines only want to have your poem there. You can't have it published in 2 different magazines. So you need to keep track of where your poems are going and why, which is why I have made a submission spreadsheet. Ooh. A submission spreadsheet is a really useful way of keeping track of where your poems are, what magazines you have submitted to, and when that you are expecting to hear back. Okay, so I'm going to show you my spreadsheet. I'm not going to go into every single magazine that is listed here. I'm just going to provide it in the description down below of all of the magazines that I have included in my spreadsheet, so that you can use it to build up your submission spreadsheet. But also, if you have some, or you've heard of some magazines that I think I should be including in my list, then please comment them below, because I definitely want to hear about them. Why don't we work together on building a big database that we can all share. One of the great places to have a look for new magazines is the Poetry Society website. They have a list of loads and loads of magazines in the UK that you can submit to, so definitely go and check that out as well. So I've zoomed right out so you can see it properly. This is my spreadsheet. I use it on Google Sheets so that it is easily available online, and so that I can access it from my phone, I can access it from my computer and my laptop, depending on where I am. Most of the time I like to work from my PC at home, but it's useful being able to access it anywhere. So for me, I have across the top are the names of all of the magazines that I've chosen to include in my spreadsheet. The next row has the filters on it, but it also has notes about each one. So for example, I got rejected from the Interpreter's House, but it was a good rejection and they did suggest resubmitting, so I'm going to resubmit when their thing reopens. I'm also, so for the MA anthology, which is a column that most of you, if you haven't finished a master's degree from Bath Spa, you won't need to have MA anthology included in yours. That's just to say that it's done, and then I've been accepted for Obsessed with Pipework. But I've also included little notes about how to submit, so like whether it's postal submissions, or whether it's email, or whether it is Submittable, which is an online submitting program that you can use. I'm going to do a separate video on all of these methods another time, but I keep the notes there. So down the left hand side, these are the names of my poems, and as you can see, they're all in different colours. The blue ones are accepted, but the red, yellow and green ones are actually whether I consider them finished or not. So the green ones are like, yeah, these are perfect, I don't need to do anything to them. And then the orange ones are like, these need a little bit of work, but I still plan on using them. And then the red ones are, I could delete these and wouldn't be sad. So that's a little bit of a guide for you there. I also have this extra column here which either says faulty manufacturing or it's left blank, and that just means whether I'm intending to include them in my collection or not, so in the final manuscript or not, because the thing is, I've written a lot of poems on this master's, as you can see. This isn't even all of them, I don't think, so that's like 3, which means that one's 50. So I've written nearly 50 poems, and not all of them fit into my collection, so that's fine. So then we move on. Let's talk about the status bar. Okay, so this is this column here right next to the names, and you have accepted and where it's been accepted. You've got free, which means I can submit them anywhere, they're like free to go out, or they've been submitted and where they've been submitted, or they're on YouTube. So a lot of magazines and literary journals, all of those, will consider you putting something on the internet as publishing it, and they therefore will not want it in their magazine if it's already available on the internet. So you've got to bear that in mind if you're going to share your poems on Instagram or on YouTube. A lot of places do consider that as publication. So that is one of the reasons why I don't share a huge amount of my poems online. So then we move into the rest of here, and basically what it is I go, okay, I want to submit to the Rialto, and I go down, I see which poems are free, and I'll pick them, I'll submit them, and then I will put submitted and the date I submitted them. From there, I will then either hear back and will mark it as rejected, or I won't hear back, and after a certain amount of time it becomes clear that they're not getting back to me. So there's a couple of magazines here that say that if you don't hear back within 3 months, then feel free to resubmit, which I think is quite a good thing, because you can see, okay, they only want it for 3 months, that's fine. Because a lot of magazines take 3 to 6 months to get back to you. I had one poem that made it to the shortlist and then got rejected, and they had my poem for 6 months. I had to wait 6 months to be rejected from them, when I could have been submitting that poem to any number of things. So there you have it. That's like the rough thing. It really helps you to know whether they've been submitted anywhere else. It's really handy for that. It helps you keep track of it. I know, having spoken to quite a few poetry pals, that people's spreadsheets all look different and they have a different system. A friend of mine also has a software which he uses for storing his poems and for how to organise that, and I'm going to try that software and do a video on that as well. So this is going to be an ongoing journey for us. So what I want to do now is just run through like little tips and tricks of advice for it. I will look at this spreadsheet at least once a week to keep it updated, and once a week I will go through all of the magazines that I haven't submitted to yet and see when their submission windows are, what their submission rules are, because each place is slightly different, and I will put that all in my calendar. Each day I can keep it up to date and know, like in a couple of weeks, one of my favourite magazines, their submission window is open, so I'm going to get ready to submit some stuff to them. And yeah, you just got to keep it updated. My next piece of advice is to like keep your chin up and don't let the muggles get you down, because just because your poems didn't make it into their upcoming edition doesn't mean that they're bad poems. It just means that it didn't belong in that issue. They couldn't find a space that worked for your poems in them, and that's okay. That's a good thing. I recently had poems accepted into Stand magazine, which is one of my favourite magazines, and they were like, yeah, it's probably going to be early 2020 that your poems get out. And I was like, great. So I've got these poems. Which ones have been... Yeah, I've got 2 poems that are going to be published in Stand magazine that won't be out for nearly a year. This takes a long time, so be patient and don't be hard on yourself, because this whole process takes a while. My next piece of advice is to actually, if you can, read the magazines, because people will recommend magazines and we'll have quite a long list here, but you need to know where is going to suit your poetry and where you want your poems to be published. Because what will happen is you might submit somewhere and either it just totally won't be the right thing, and they'll know you'll have never read their magazine because they're like, we only publish form poetry, and here you are with a spoken word piece on a piece and trying to submit that. No, who are you? Get out. Or you might be publishing somewhere that is just so not in your style. So you want to get to know each of your magazines that you want to get yourself into, to know if your style suits them. The other reason is, what if you submit somewhere and you get accepted, and then you realise you get the magazine in the post or whatever, you get your contributor's copy, and you're like, oh, this is not the magazine I wanted my poems to be in. Because you can't take that back once that's happened. So that's something to bear in mind. So be very careful about that. You want to create a list of magazines that is right for you, and not just, whilst I understand the want to throw it out there and keep it, throw as much shit at the walls and see what sticks. You definitely want to make sure you're throwing your shit at the right walls for your shit, if that makes sense. I'm going to run through exactly how to go about submitting your poems in the next video, but your homework for now is to start your submission spreadsheet and start researching the magazines that you want your things to be included in. Maybe go out there and subscribe to a few magazines to see where you want to be. I've got a couple of subscriptions that I want to start based on what I've seen online, and so I'm going to start subscribing to magazines. If you don't have the money for like a yearly subscription or stuff like that, a lot of magazines will sell individual copies, which can be a good way of getting a vibe of what they do and whether your poetry would fit there, so it's worth looking into that. Or some will be available in libraries and things like that. So just go online, go to the magazine's website and see what's available and how much you can find out from them. And then we will next week go through how to submit your poems for a journal. Other things that I'm going to cover in this series are, I made a little mind map, how spoken word poets get themselves published. I'm going to talk about self-publishing and whether that can work for you, because it does work for people. And then we're going to talk about competitions and whether they're worth it, and how to judge whether a competition is worth doing. And then we're going to do how to submit, and I'm also going to talk about the Society of Authors, and talk about like publishing contracts a little bit, and about trying to find out how a publishing contract works and how to make that work best for you and your situation. So, is there anything else on how to publish poems that you want to know about? If so, chuck them in the comments below, message me on Instagram, DM me on Twitter, do whatever you want to do to let me know what you want to learn about in terms of publishing poetry, and we'll go from there. I hope this has been useful. Please let me know if there's any big bits that I missed. Please let me know if your spreadsheet is different to mine. Tell me how yours is different and what you do. I want to know, and I will see you all later. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, recommend it to your friends, and watch all my other videos. I've been doing a load of how to write a poem videos, I've been doing book reviews, because if there's one thing I have learned to improve your poetry, it's to read other people's poetry and analyse what makes it good, what makes it bad, and go from there. So yeah, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, do all of the YouTube things, and I will see you all next week. Thanks very much. Bye. My mug today is my Don't Let the Muggles Get You Down mug, because that's what you need to keep reminding yourself when you're submitting endlessly to journals and they take so long to get back to you that you just want to be rejected by the end of it.